Full Service Radio is proudly supported and hosted by Simplecast, the easiest way for a podcast creator to publish and distribute audio on the internet. For more information, visit simplecast.com.
Recorded live from the lobby of the Line Hotel in Adams Morgan, Washington, D.C.
Peace, everyone, and welcome to the Edible Activist Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa L. Jones, broadcasting live from the lobby of the Line, D.C. This podcast is where dynamic people of color in the food and agricultural space share their personal food journeys, passions, and perspectives that stem from the land, all exemplifying the spirit of activism in their own edible way. Let's get started. Peace, everyone, and welcome to the Edible Activist Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa L. Jones, broadcasting live from the lobby of the Line, D.C. here on Full Service Radio. So for today's show, Black food justice. These are words that echo sovereignty, equity, decolonization, and our rights. We talk a great deal about food access in quote-unquote deserts, but the heart of the issue is a system of poverty, systemic racism, and a huge wealth gap. In studio today, I am joined by Asha Carter, who is a social justice educator, community organizer, and environmental justice advocate. Who's been diligent and persistent in the fight for food justice. And as the new deputy director, I can talk today, guys, with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance based in Atlanta, her work continues in the area of land and food organizing. Welcome to the show, Asha. How are you?
Thanks, Melissa. Thank you for having me. I'm so good today. It's awesome to be here with you.
Wonderful. So I just learned a few moments ago, right, that this is Asha's first podcast.
Yes.
I probably just made her even more nervous. And it probably didn't help that I was stumbling over my words, but it's a Wednesday and I'm here. We're in full effect. And this is going to be A-okay because you got this. All right. So Asha, I met you for the first time. Was it last year or this year?
Goodness, maybe maybe it was.
No,
this
I
year.
think it was this year.
Wow.
That is crazy.
A year. We've been through a lot this year.
We have. Needless to say, I am so glad that we crossed paths.
Same.
And I've been following you for quite some time because I stalk everybody who's doing great work. Let me just be very clear about who I stalk and why I stalk them, right? And just always a joy to meet someone who is, fighting for our food justice and, building and strategizing. And she's a very smart girl. Like, go find her on LinkedIn and just read through her vitae. I don't even gotta go through it, okay? Like, she's a smart girl. You should probably be leading these conversations today, okay?
I appreciate it.
So, Asha, congrats actually for because you are new to the National Black Food and Justice Alliance as the deputy director. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
So you have a lot on your plate,
Yes.
literally.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes, in every sense.
In every sense. And so, the center of our conversations is going to be centered on Black food justice, right?
Awesome.
And everyone deserves food justice. Let me just put that out there for the context
100%.
of these conversations, definitely, want to talk about the fight for food justice for marginalized communities, Black and brown folks, and beyond. It's food, it's land, it's equity, it's everything.
Absolutely.
And agriculture and food is connected to all of those things. So at the top of the conversation, Asha, define for the audience what Black food justice means to you.
Yes. So I think first and foremost, it's important to honor that there's a really long tradition of people who have done this work.
Absolutely.
Who have done the work to organize folks, to take care of us, to feed ourselves. and to make it so that we are determining for our own lives. And so I'm really thankful for that tradition, for being able to learn from folks and to be able to be part of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance now, and be able to be learning from so many elders and peers and young people who just have so much wisdom, right? And so for me, when I think about Black food justice, the first thing that comes to my mind is self-determination. And so it's really about individuals being able to choose what we need, but also about collectives being able to determine what we need and to be able to have control over our own decisions that are going to affect our lives, and also over our own, the things that make it so that we can live, right? Food, housing, these necessities that are really inextricable from one another. And so when I think about food justice and Black food justice, it's also really important to understand that that's inextricable from conversations about land and about land use, land distribution, land theft in this country, genocide in this country, and what the legacy of that has done to the ways that people are able to access not only land, but the things that come from it, which include not only food, but just a level of being able to govern oneself, and also being able to provide safety and rest and respite. There's a long history of
and
movement.
to take care of your family.
Yes, and to take care of your family, right? To take care of your family and understand that your family is not only like your nuclear family, but also your grandmama and them, and then also your cousins and them, and all
And
the
the
neighbors, actually your cousins, right? But all your cousins.
Exactly.
It's about this like extended network of us, and really
The whole tree.
the whole tree, and it's about really understanding us as an ecosystem of interdependent beings, right? Like we need each other, and so how do we recognize the way that the current structures have taken us out of right relationship with each other, right relationship with the land, and right relationship with ourselves, and be thinking about how do we work to get back in the right way with that. And so it involves really questioning the structures that exist right now and working to shift them, and to build, while we work to shift the existing enormous structure,
Place
right,
emphasis on
behemoth, structure, right? And so while we have folks who are super dope organizing to work to shift that system, we also have to be working to build our own, to fortify folks who are currently on the land, to fortify those land bases, to provide space for people's rest and healing and political education and growing food and health and care for ourselves, which we also are so alienated from by this super extractive, hyper-capitalist patriarchal system. And so it's for me, like, if we have food justice, it's the rectification of those things. It's the restoration. It's us living in right and whole relationship with each other and with the land. And, that includes not extracting from each other and from the land.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You said a very powerful word. You said a lot of powerful words. Some of them I couldn't even keep up with. But okay, girl, I heard you. For restoration, when we talk about food justice, restorative.
Yeah.
Like, that's holistic. That's whole.
Yeah.
And you talk about an ecosystem. So yes, the ecosystem that's beneath our feet, but the ecosystem that surrounds us, that encompasses, like you said, our aunts, our cousins, the family.
Yeah. We are part of the environment. We are our own environment we have to be healthy with as well.
We are all of the earth. We are all connected.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Wow. So, Asha, you grew up in a very activism forward household, from what I read. And so, just mentioned to you before the show, I was talking to the lovely Crystal Mack last week. Yes, snap. Baltimore-based artist, amazing. Look her up. Google her.
Yes.
You'll find her. And, we were talking about the word activism, right? And she said it's a word that she doesn't necessarily like to identify as, or she doesn't use, only because, like, when you think of activism, you think of, like, on the front line and you're pumping your fist and, picketing but I totally get it, because I ain't out there.
Important. Yeah,
I've been at a couple of the marches, but I ain't out there all the time, But activism is just an innate thing, especially for Black people and people of color, because there's always been this internal fight for something. And so growing up in the household, and you're from Atlanta, and, being in a household that was very activism forward, what was that like? Because I'm sure it instilled so many principles.
Yeah, definitely. So first and foremost, I would say that like we all do our activism, our engagement in a number of ways, and like, sis, this is movement work, right? Like this is connecting people with each other.
That's a t-shirt. Yes. This is movement work. Somebody probably already has it out there. Actually.
Right. This is movement work. Just to point to the kinds of connections that we need with each other to be able to do the kind of building that folks are talking about, and the exposure to each other's ideas and sharpening one another. Like this is some of that. It's like having salons and spaces for people to interrogate things together. So that's super dope, really important part of the political and organizing process. It's funny, like I also don't generally identify as an activist, partially because I was coming out of the Black Youth Project 100, where people were like, we are organizers, right? Because we're talking about like strategy and thinking about like the big picture and power relations and blah. But I think that it's, I didn't think so much about my childhood as being like activist forward growing up. And so it's funny, like looking at it in hindsight and being like, okay, so, my mom and dad, I knew very early, they were like, oh yeah, we went to a march in Stone Mountain where the Klan does their thing and got glass bottles thrown at us by the Klan. And that's just like a thing that happened. My parents were always really intentional about sharing with me their own history and things that they knew, and also just opening space for me to ask questions and to have the depth and breadth of conversations.
That's important.
It really is. Like, I think that my parents did so much less really putting into me a specific political ideology than they did like really allowing me space to explore and to interrogate and not to treat a question like a bad question. But they also were very intentional about my racial identity development and about my understanding of my history. And my grandmother is also a super integral part of that for me. And
by the way, sorry, I just want to pause I was reading an article a few days ago. Your grandmother worked with the Black Panthers.
So she helped with some work that the Panthers were doing on the West Coast. My grandmother was in Portland and in Washington and in Cali, so West Coast.
West Coast all the way, baby.
West Coast, yeah. I'm from the South, and my mama's family's from West Coast for the last couple generations. So I have a lot of folks over there.
Cool.
But so, my grandmother was always really intentional about showing me in so many ways that the history that I was going to get in school were going to be lies. I was very clear by the time that I reached fourth grade and had a teacher tell me, my fourth grade teacher told our class that the way that the slave trade happened was that the Europeans went over to Africa and saw the people there didn't have like housing or jobs. And so we're like, we can give you housing and jobs in the New World. And they were like, great, let's do that.
Studio, seeing my head turn.
It was so wild. But by the time, but I was able, by the time I was 8 in that classroom, to raise my hand and say, actually,
hold up.
People brought over in chains, actually, and manacles and packed one on top of another and dying and over the sea. Like, this is not, that's not true. And having those experiences at 7, 8 years old, because my parents had this book. My grandmother had this book on the coffee table called Lest We Forget. I recommend people get it. Lest We Forget. I'm trying to figure out how to talk with your children about the slave trade. It's really intense, but it also is a book that for me, it was on my coffee table growing up, and it has textural elements in the book, so you can touch cool. These are like raised manacles, or this is what a piece of a whip feels like. And as a child, for me, this, of course, that is like extremely traumatizing and like it's terrible.
Absolutely.
And also understanding that so early, and also having parents and a grandmother who were really intentional about being like, okay, yeah, this is your history, this is what you come out of, and you are responsible to these people, this broader group of us. You never walk into a room by yourself. You bring us with you, and you I think that there's a lot of
generations with you.
Yes, generations, ancestors.
Oh my gosh.
And so there were so many stories going up about, like what my great grandmother was like. They were in Arkansas, and there was a problem with a white man, and they went all the way to Portland. Like there's like so much history of movement and struggle and building and creation. My paternal grandfather didn't get the sort of promotions in the firefighters space as he would have, because he was like Big Al and was going to speak up about the black firefighters and what they were dealing with. And wasn't going to be quiet and wasn't going to sit down, even if that would have been better for him on his own. It was about us. And so that was always really deeply infused in my life. My parents took out, I know now as an adult that they took out loans so I could be in Imhotep Academy, this private black Afrocentric school with kente cloth and uniform when I was 4 and 5.
Okay, fight the power.
Yeah, they were
5. Okay.
They were like, you need the affirmation of how great you are, because this world is going to try to break you down, and so you need to have that grounding really early. And so I think their intentionality about building me up in that way in my history and in the connection then to the legacy that I'm a part of was super foundational for me, both in understanding the sort of work that I want to be doing in this world and that I feel mission to do, but also in terms of understanding just really myself and what I personally feel connected to, and feel like my grandmother and great grandmother want for me in this world.
Oh my gosh! And they are reaching out to you, honey. And the ancestors are reaching out to you.
I've been
touching
feeling them.
They are touching you. So for those who are just tuning in, this is Melissa L. Jones here with the Edible Activist Podcast, broadcasting live from the lobby of the Line DC here on Full Service Radio. And I am joined in studio today with the wonderful and beautiful Asha Carter, who is a social justice educator, a community organizer, environmental justice advocate, and she recently joined the National Black Food and Justice Alliance as the deputy director. I actually had her just define what Black food justice and food justice means to her. She grew up in a very activism-forward household, and just really at a very young age, as early as 4 or 5, being able to identify with self because of her parents and what the principles that they instilled in her, to know her heritage, to know where we came from as Black people. And actually just going back to the classroom where a teacher was really trying to tell you in the history of slavery, and at 8 years old, you're holding your hand up saying, that ain't it. To talk about being met with extraction, yeah. And me coming up, I would have just been sitting in the class because that my parents didn't instill that into me. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it's just what it was. Yeah, exactly. But speaking of extraction and knowing our history and utilizing language to tell our story, and being in the space that you're in, and you're meeting with elders who have, lived this history, lived these stories, and you see it for what it is. And then we have the outer world, or this capitalistic world, calling it something different, really just speak to the importance of the language that we should be using to tell our story and to share our history, and opposing the extraction that has been present since forever, because we do. And you know what, Asha, we have a responsibility, and I don't know at what point the light bulb clicks, for us as adults, but we have a responsibility to be able to connect with ourselves and know our identity and know where we come from, so that we can oppose these things. Because if we don't, it'll just happen. Right. And that is an individual responsibility, because we can't change anything if we don't hold to that responsibility.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with being open to the truth of what we experience.
Wow, yeah.
Being open to the truth of what we experience, and then finding the kind of support where you feel like you can do that sort of living and speaking in that truth. I think a lot of the work that I have done for the last few years prior to me joining the Alliance was really to try to support people who are living at these intersections, dealing with issues with housing and food, and they're always, super combined. Black people who are resilient and have been working and building and moving for such a very long time, and to listen to those folks who are like, I'm trying to build my community and build our own resilience, and to help support people with the sort of tools to be able to do that. I think that it's really important that the resilience and our connection to you're talking like non-extractive language. So when I think about extractive language, some of the things I think about is like food desert, right?
Yeah.
So the framing of a food desert, first of all, that language did not come from anybody who actually lives in one of the places that's designated as a food desert.
Right.
And if you ask people who live in these areas, I don't live in a desert, and I do have food. And so there's this gap in understanding, because there's a gap in who created that language and who identified the problem in the scholarship.
Getting to the root of,
And so Karen Washington talks about food apartheid, and that's what a lot of us have been using to understand really the structural system that we're in that makes it so that food access looks like it does. And the people's access to food and difficulties with accessing food, it's deeper than a grocery store, and it's overlaid with, thinking about urban areas, right? Issues with food are overlaid with not surprisingly, diet-related chronic illnesses, but also disinvestment in the infrastructure for safety, for housing,
Absolutely.
for schools. If you look at the maps of Chicago, the school shutdowns, lay over the quote unquote food deserts, almost exactly. These are interlocking systems that people are in, and so in working with folks around these issues and understanding the base of them, I think it's important for us to speak to the complexity and fullness of our stories, and the richness that already exists, and to not be afraid to. Not be afraid, I think, to just share that fullness where you feel like it's honored, right? And I think it's important to think about what spaces are going to honor you and not honor you.
Right.
But yeah, I think that the more that we can be authentic with ourselves and one another and with what we're experiencing, just the closer we'll get. It's easy to get lost in policy and lost in language or concepts. But if we can just be talking to each other and building authentic relationship with each other and talking about what we and our folks have been through, we're going to be able to get a lot further. And so I think creating space for that kind of authentic sharing is really necessary.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned to you before, and I'm very transparent about this. I'm still learning. I'm learning every day.
Totally same.
I read a lot, a ton, because I have a responsibility to stay educated, especially I'm in here interviewing, wonderful people, not just to learn about your work, but just to learn about the issues that have longstanding issues, historical issues. But I want to know, the language. What are we using? And that does take me, reading certain articles or going to certain collectives, and just really defining what is happening in present time. What is that now? So again, huge learning space for me. When I came into this entire space, I'm not going to say I was naive. I just didn't. It was the gap the gap in understanding that I was just like, oh, okay, this is a desert. That's a desert, and I'm like, no, it's not. And especially, when you look at communities, rich communities who may not have a grocery store around the corner from them, it's not that it's an access issue. It just ain't close. They have the money. But, really looking at from a structural point of view and just seeing, the huge wealth gap and how, their institutions built on racism and systemic racism.
Yep.
Calling it what it is. And so that has been a learning journey for me, and just really looking at these systems, breaking down these systems and saying, oh my goodness, land, which is the foundation of everything, even within itself is just a whole nother avenue just to break down and explore the issues with land loss and theft, and really understanding, the historical context of class and wealth. It's all related. So again, for me, it's been this huge learning curve, a journey that I'm so excited to explore. And again, it is my responsibility to really, read up on these things and be a part of these conversations. And sometimes just sit back in the corner and just listen.
Yeah, I think so much of it is us being able to be in spaces with each other to just talk and share, and also to respect that all of us, like each of us is an expert in something, and we're all the expert of our own experience.
Because let's be clear, I'm staying in my lane, guys. Okay, I'm not veering on over into other lanes. I'm staying in my lane.
Let me tell you, we had a meeting this weekend in North Carolina, and it was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful meeting. And you know what we needed? We needed event planning support. Okay, and that's what we had. That was necessary to make that space beautiful. And we need people who are in finance and in law and doing database spreadsheet entry and doing organizing out with people, throwing parties to bring people together.
Those are skill sets. They're
all
needed.
Of those. We need all of it because it's the richness of that, the breadth of that ecosystem, the diversity of that ecosystem,
right?
That is going to make us thrive.
Right.
It's that. We just need it all.
Absolutely. And just to go back to, when we talk about food access and we talk about food apartheid, just even remember you actually might have even been a catalyst for me to really looking into these systems, because I'm sure these are your words from you. Again, we have to give honor to our ancestors and those who came before us who have really been in this fight for a long time. But you can't talk about food access without talking about poverty and wealth gap. You cannot have those conversations because if you don't, it's an issue that just keeps circling around and nothing gets fixed.
Yeah, you're just missing. You're missing it.
You're really throwing a dart, and you ain't even landing on. You throwing it at somebody else. You cannot talk about those issues.
If you're talking about food access and are not talking about food justice, you're probably already missing it a little bit. If you're talking about food access and you don't have a strong class analysis and a strong race analysis, you're certainly missing it. Certainly. Because those are the forces that have made our food system what it is, that have made our economic system what it is, right? These are all, these histories all were lived together and cemented together. And so I think the more that we can, I've been in my new role now for almost 4 months, and I am just awed at how much I am always learning.
Wow.
There's just so much, and there's so much history of our resilience and building new structures and building ways to work together cooperatively and save together cooperatively and own businesses together and build home and safety for one another. And so I am just so enthused by and awed by and honored and humbled by that history and the honor to be in it together right now. We are in that history together right now.
We are, girlfriend. All right, guys, we're going to take a really quick break and we will be right back. You're listening to Perfect Day, produced by Artist Authentic. For more of Authentic's work, visit allornothingstudios.com. All right. Welcome back, everyone. This is Melissa L. Jones here with the Edible Activist Podcast, and I'm your wonderful host today and every Wednesday.
Yes, you are.
And broadcasting live from the lobby of the Line DC here on Full Service Radio. And I have been chatting here with the lovely Asha Carter. Asha, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You are wonderful. I'm so glad to have you in this space. For those who are just tuning in for the second half of the show, Asha is a social justice educator, community organizer, and environmental justice advocate. She is also the new deputy director with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance based in Atlanta. And so we're just going to touch briefly about your role with the Justice Alliance, and we talked about it just a bit. Mm-hmm. She's only been in that role for 4 months, y'all. Okay, she got a lot on her plate. She actually just got back. She was traveling, so and a lot more to come in 2020. Yes. A lot more to come in 2020. So just talking all things food justice and access, land. Asha, how would you define your relationship with the land or to the land?
Yeah. So I'm a tree hugger, to be honest. Like, I was a little kid who would just like look up at the trees and like ask other people like if they noticed how magnificent the trees were. Like I was just like, there are these 100-year-old things just beside us, hundreds of years just here growing, nurturing other things, and we just walk by them. And so I've always been really awed by just like the magnificence of nature, and had, my grandmother gardened, and my mother's also this way, so we like went to parks and stuff. And so I have lived also in cities for my whole life. Yeah. I've never lived more than 30 minutes outside of the metro area, or outside of an actual city. I've always lived in the metro area. Yeah. So, and so, I've lived in DC for 5 years now, and I am definitely in a place where I'm thinking about, like, what do I need, what sort of proximity do I need to the land in terms of my work, but also just like for my heart, for my soul, for the way my chest feels. Like, I need to be in the trees more. Yeah, I need to be by water more.
I feel you.
Just the kind of calm that I can feel when I'm like by a beach and just remembering how small I am, or by, a river. I just, I think that so often we don't get the chance, the space, especially in Black communities, especially in communities of color across this country, don't have access to the kinds of just like natural space and places for that kind of respite. And it's really necessary for our health. I think, I and a lot of other people I know with, struggle with, depression, like anxiety,
that's
right?
And
like,
it's real.
PTSD, like this stuff is traumatic as all get out, right? And like, I think about like, what is it that makes me feel good? What is it that makes me feel right and safe and whole with the world? And it's like, like being where I feel like I'm more supposed to be, which is like in nature. And so I think that there's lots of study and increasing study being done, because we need the scientific research, about the benefits of people being among trees, among trees. Like, even if you're not in like a big nature preserve, but just like among trees,
just being able to walk down a street and see a tree, because you'd be amazed with all this development going on.
I see more cranes than anything.
More cranes than trees.
And DC got more trees in a lot of places, and so
it's
wild. It's wild.
Go to downtown Silver Spring, guys, in that area over near Whole Foods. I was over there, and I was just like, something is missing.
Yes,
something is missing, and they cut the trees down. It's depressing.
It really is. It really is. I think thinking about the ways that that's harmful and like harms like this part of our ecosystem, which is also like harming ourselves.
Absolutely.
And I think that when you are spending more time, like I'm just thinking about the growers that I know, the homesteaders that I know, like they just have a much clearer sense of what like balance is and what equilibrium is and cycles.
Absolutely.
And rest, just like just more grounded. It just feels correct. Each time that I'm in those spaces, I'm just like, oh, this feels correct. You're also struggling because hyper-corporatization is strangling farmers across this country and has continued to and is continuing to, and Black farmers are really feeling like the enormous brunt of that. and the kind of wisdom and understanding about what's important / the kind of like way that people know about like just what is correct. Like there's just like a real deep groundedness to it, if you will. That's really, I'm just excited to get to just learn more from.
Asha, I'm going to find a tree today and I'm going to hug it.
Hug it. Take some deep breaths. Breathe deep. Breathe deep. Go sit with the tree and see what the tree has to teach you. And it sounds
like tree. The tree going to be like, yo. I'll be like, what up, tree? Tree gonna be like, I ain't seen you in a minute. But I just walked down Euclid, though. I could have hugged the tree when I was walking down the street.
But it's like the tree will be like, okay, we're here together. We're here together.
We're here.
What are we learning and hearing, listening to together?
Oh my gosh, I might not want to leave the tree, and I got stuff to do.
That's real. That's real. Yeah. And so it's like, how do we get ourselves like doing the things that we need to do and that we want to do and that we're missioned to do, and also doing it without making ourselves sick. Without exhausting ourselves. We are our most precious resource. We, the collective, we are our most body. We got one, okay?
And you gotta take care of it.
You get one body, you get one bladder. I tell people, you get one. So you gotta take care of it.
That's it. Okay. Well, do you foresee yourself living on the land at all?
I really do want to. I really do want to. I'm big dreams. I'm a city girl.
I know
it's where I'm from. I like to move around. Quick pace.
Where the bus at? Where the train?
Right? Yeah, like I was shook by moving to the suburbs when I was a teenager. I was like, I'm sorry, like there's no bus out here. What am I gonna do? But I also know the kind of peace. Peace is the word that it is, just the kind of peace that I can feel. And I think that the lessons that we can learn from the land, from being on the land, from observing what nature has to teach us, those are the kinds of lessons and the kind of posturing that we need to build the kind of right relationship with this world that we want. And I think that we have to learn from it in order to be able to like create it amongst ourselves. And so, and I think that in order to create real like safety, that helps make some of that peace real. I think that having land that you can continue to have access to, having land that you will not be harassed by police on, having land that you are going to be fed and held on.
Absolutely.
And I want that for myself, and I want it to be more possible for more people, which is why I'm doing this work, and especially for Black people upon whom this food system was built, the genocide of indigenous peoples and extraction from them and extraction from African peoples brought to this land. I also, like, my great-grandmother, they were sharecroppers. They picked berries, and even though my grandmother grew up with this very extractive economic system, like watching her parents be part of and needing to pick berries with them, she also taught me to garden and love to garden, right? Like, it's not the relationship with the land, like that is not the wrong thing. It's this extractive system on top of it. And so how do we live into the beauty of like what our, I think, more reconciled relationship with the land can be? Like, that feels like the kind of work that I want to do and that I want to be able to actualize some in my own life, and then to be able to make possible for, my children, if and when I have them, and other folks is like, we got babies out here. How do we make it? Get us free.
Get us free. Liberate us.
Truly.
I'm telling you, man. And the land will do that.
Yeah.
Some land will do that.
Yeah, gotta take care of ourselves.
So we're going to wrap up in a few moments, but definitely want to touch just a bit touch on your work as the Deputy Director with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, and surrounding your work of land organizing and food organizing. I want the audience to get just a basic understanding of what a land trust is, because I know you all do a lot of work when it comes to land trust, and which is a big deal. And just having an understanding of how that works, how is one created, and I'm sure there are complications that come along with it. Asha just rolled her eyes like, yeah, boy. But just start off with a basic understanding of what a land trust is and how that operates.
Yeah. So a couple of things that a land trust exists to kind of solve for. Mm-hmm. So one thing, we have issues with grocery access in DC and also with gentrification, displacement, and with housing prices skyrocketing, and people then not being able to pay to live in this city, where many people have been for a long time. And so some of what a land trust could make possible in an urban environment is for that land to actually be held in trust. So it's held collectively, and so the individuals there are not liable for the land. Mm-hmm. They're not responsible for the land. And so So it makes it more possible because of some other like financial levers.
I know there are layers.
There are
layers.
I'm like, I can recommend a book. I'm happy to share some titles after this. But really to help it make it so that the people, there's so much history of housing discrimination in this country, redlining, gentrification, redlining, gerrymandering, all these things that make it. There's just a lot. And so a land trust makes it so that individuals are not, you can yank something out from an individual, but yanking something out of a trust, out of a collective is much more difficult. Mm-hmm. And so
because it's protected.
Right, it's protected. And you are paying your rent to the trust.
To the trust.
It's like,
okay,
yeah.
got it.
And so it's not, you're not in jeopardy of losing that land. Like that land is held in trust. And so the thing too is that people in a trust do not actually own the land. Usually they own the house on the land, improvements on the land, and can pass that down. So it makes it so they're not liable for like land.
So who owns the actual land?
Trust.
The trust.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The trust.
Got it.
And so it removes the kind of, a single black family goes bankrupt or like loses all of their
land.
Well,
yeah, because you lose the land and everything else just goes.
I
gotcha.
Right? So it's like, how do we solidify? So in urban areas, that's being interrogated. I know there's some dope work happening in Oakland around that, land trust, community land trusts, and really community centric, because they're land trusts, but it's really important that community land trusts, there are a lot of things also like masquerading as community land trusts, but community land trusts are really where the people who are living on that land, working on that land, are the people who are on the board, like responsible for making decisions about that. They have deep power, and there's usually a community development corporation that is working in partnership with the trust that the community members who live there are actively like in charge of and moving forward. And so they are determining what sort of development, what they want their community to look like. And and without the kind of it takes land off of the speculative market. So it's not something that can then be bought by a developer later to be able to do some high money thing with. It just removes it from that market by putting it into trust.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
does that make it more difficult to start a trust then?
It's not easy. It's not easy. And so, and there's, and I'm not super deep in all the mechanics of the land trust. A lot of what we do is like convening these land trusts to be able to talk with one another, and trying to help different land bases that are currently not in trust, like think about what it would be like to be able to be held in trust and like interrogating
which is really
that.
cool. That's amazing.
And so I think there's a lot of it's one of the big levers, I think, that can be used, one of the big mechanisms that can be used to help people hold land and be able to stay in place in urban areas, but also in rural areas, right? And to be able to hold these larger tracts of land. New Communities, we talked about briefly before. So New Communities was the first community land trust, and it was in Albany, Georgia. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary this fall in Albany. It was really beautiful.
So exciting.
Shirley Sherrod and folks down there. And their original vision was to have they had this land and to have it in trust and to have 3 villages on it, communities that had schools, that had their recreation, that had the swimming hole, that had the everything, that had what they would need to be able to be, this is 1969. So it's like to have what they needed to be able to be safe and sustaining themselves together. And the thing is that I think it's important for everyone to keep in mind that we globally are in a very precarious place, and that as climate change accelerates, as our extractive economy like runs to its logical conclusion, like there's going to be collapse. There's collapse, and there are supply chains we won't be able to rely on the same way anymore because the environment's not working the same way anymore. The economics are going to follow,
and nature is clapping back hard.
And so we're going to have to figure out, how do we in this little region take care of feeding ourselves together? What does that look like? And how do we not reproduce the oppression that exists right now by like continue to keep the foot on the neck of Black people, Indigenous folks, migrant workers, Latinx people, like people who are like doing this work and being extracted from at the bottom generally, and poor white folks, right?
Yep.
And how are we building intentionally, knowing that like us going to the supermarket in the way that we are right now, like that's not going to be the way for the whole time that I'm alive.
Nope.
It just isn't. It's going to change in my lifetime. So we gotta prepare for it in a real way. So that means investing in our folks and in our resilience right now. And so doing things like putting land into trust, like building the sorts of like collective like purchasing, like trying to connect people who, you're a producer here and I have a market here, and I can right now support you and make sure that your farm doesn't go under by buying all these watermelons from you and making sure this happens. Like these sorts of things.
And creating our own like systems.
Absolutely. We have to create our own systems because these ones that we've relied on for so long, they are not going to exist at the end of the century. They're not.
But they never worked for us anyway.
Exactly.
They were never for us.
And they never worked for us in the first place. They were always extracting us in the first place. And so the opportunity that there is in this thing being as heinous as it is that we can see that. We have the opportunity to really like see that for what it is, and then use the space to create what it is that would not be heinous, right? Like that would be the world that we want to see. And I think there's a lot of I'm excited about that.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Well, this is the part of the show that I hate. Now it's time to say goodbye. No, not goodbye. See you later, girl. We're gonna see you later.
Truly.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
This was an honor, and I've learned so much from you today, and I look forward to learning more from you in the future. I look forward to following more of the National Black Food Justice and Alliance organization's work. And shout out to Dara Cooper.
Yeah, shout out to Dara.
I haven't met her, but I'm sending my love
She's awesome.
And light you all's way. So this has been amazing. So we're going to do a really quick rapid fire, right?
Okay, great.
But tell folks where to find, if you want them to find you online. If not, that's fine. But websites, like whatever you want to toss out there for folks to follow, the work. So.
Yeah, so blackfoodjustice.org. Okay. That is the website of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance.
Cool.
I'm also Asha, ASHA at blackfoodjustice.org if you need to hit me up.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Asha. So real quick, what is your favorite veggie? Oh. Your face turned to grimace.
Well, because I'm like, I love so many vegetables. It's very difficult. Spinach.
Okay. That's my grandma's favorite. Spinach.
I live for some spinach. Garlic and some garlic, spinach.
Just don't talk to anybody the next day or the next moment. Because I like lots of garlic.
Same. Lots of garlic. There's not a such thing as too much.
Favorite fruit?
Oh, mango.
Sweet, spicy, sour, salty.
Oh, spicy, salty.
No one has ever said those two combinations before. Oh my gosh, you're first.
That's it.
Last artist you listen to in your playlist?
Ooh, I listened to Homecoming this morning.
Nice.
It was great to get me in the zone.
Nice. Well, this definitely ends this episode on a great note. Homecoming. All right. Thanks again, Asha. Peace, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care, y'all.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We are here live on Full Service Radio every Wednesday at 11 a.m., where you can catch today's episode on fullserviceradio.org, as well as iTunes and Spotify. Be sure to follow me at Food Talks in Color on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Are you an edible activist? Sure you are. Come join me on the show. I would love to feature you. Just shoot me a DM on the gram. Peace and blessings all. And remember, there is no culture without agriculture.